Hey guys, welcome back to our channel. Thank you for subscribing and following us. And today I want to talk about some educational content that is relevant for most people, regardless if you're in the commercial real estate or if you're a renter or if you have businesses, because you will need to be dealing with leases. So if you're a student, young professional, you're going to be signing leases for a house or apartment. And if you have a business, you're going to be signing leases with a landlord. Or even if you have a business like a legal firm, you're going to have leases in an office building. So there are a lot of great number of leases out there, type of leases. But regardless if it's multifamily, industrial, retail, or office, it's going to generally fall under these three categories of leases. The first one is called a net lease. And within the net lease, there's three things: single net, double net, triple net. The second is going to be modified gross lease. The last one is full service gross, and when also full service gross without pass-throughs. And generally all leases are going to fall under those three type of leases. Let me start off with triple net leases or net leases. Most people understand triple net leases because they're really within retail asset classes. There are some offices that are triple net and industrial triple net, but generally the triple net leases will fall under retail. Retail means like Starbucks, grocery anchor, like Whole Foods or CVS, things like that. So, the common type of net lease is going to be single net lease, which is tenant usually covers the property tax. So the net lease is going to have a two component. You're going to have a component of base rent, which is what they advertise. So as an example, if you're looking at a space and the landlord's advertising 1,000 square foot or 2,000 square foot is $2.25. That is your base rent. So that's what you're going to be paying per month. And the next component is going to be the nets. So single net, you're going to have usually property taxes. And if you have a double net lease, usually it's property tax and insurance. And triple net lease is going to be property tax, insurance, and common area maintenance. Those are what really consists of. I'm not going to go into all the CAM charges and whatnot, but those are the things you're going to be looking for. That's a really common, and you see it in office leases as well. In Chicago, a lot of it, the Class A's go with the net leases, as well as if you're a single tenant, you're going to have a net lease. So even an office product, as an example, if you have a 200,000 square foot building and Wells Fargo is the sole tenant, then you're going to be on a triple net, because you're the only one using the property. So those are some of the leases that you'll see commonly in retail assets. What's the pros and cons to that? The pro is going to be for the landlords. A lot of landlords like triple net leases because they get to pass everything onto the tenant. So if they have to spend money for property taxes or insurance or maintain the property, that gets passed on to the tenant. So theoretically, if you have a building that's 100% occupied, you might have zero leakage. The leakage means there's nothing that's coming out of your pocket. Everything's getting reimbursed by the tenants who occupy the premises or the space. So that's why triple net is somewhat attractive for the landlord. You'll see that more in retail assets. And within the retail asset, there's something called a percentage lease. I'm not sure if you're young. If you're young, you probably haven't heard of that. But, percentage leases was really kind of brought up and used frequently in retail assets and restaurants, but more on the mall setting. So back in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, everyone went shopping to the mall. E-commerce wasn't as prevalent. You didn't go buy things from Amazon where they do the same day delivery. Back then, the delivery took 7 to 10 days. I know, 10 days? What the hell? But we have to, we have to actually pay for shipping too back in the days. But because technology got so much better, it really revolutionized the whole retail play by Amazon and a lot of other ones coming in as e-commerce. But going back to percentage lease was using mall. So as an example, if you had Wetzel's Pretzel, they will pay base rent plus their triple nets. But sometimes they have something called a percentage lease. So what that means is they pay their rent and the triple nets, but if they did their business above their benchmark, as an example, if they did more than $1 million of gross revenue, anything above that, landlord will participate in a percentage of that. So 6%, 5%. So those are considered additional rent. And the idea behind that is, hey, it's a mall. The owner of the mall is generating a venue that brings in the foot traffic. Therefore, your business is going to do much better than somewhere that's remote where you don't get the foot traffic. Therefore, if you're successful, me as a landlord, I want to participate in your success. That's how the ideas came around. But these days, percentage lease is not really seen too much. And that also goes for restaurants as well. And the next one is going to be modified gross lease. And modified gross just means the word modify. It's just modified. It's not triple net. It's not a full service gross. I'm going to talk about full service gross, but modify means anything in between. So if it was an office product or retail product, and even what we call double net, that's also modified. That's the certain thing you have to understand. And modify is a big range of things. So you could pay your base rent and maybe you only pay common area maintenance. That's called modify, right? Or if you pay your base rent and property tax and insurance, is considered modified, right? In retail, they call it double net and single net, but in most other asset classes, it can be modified gross. That's what they call it. And usually the tenant pays a fixed base rent amount to the landlord, just like the base rent. Then usually they have a certain share of expenses. So I'm going to use an example. Most of the modified leases are going to be really prevalent in office products. So the office product usually has something called a base year or base stop. I know it's complicated, but what the base year and base stop really identify is the expenses of that building. So as an example, if your base year is 2018 and the building spent $1 million of expenses in 2018, that's your baseline. That's your benchmark. So anything up to $1 million, the landlord's not going to pass on that expenses to you. But in 2019, let's say they spent $1,100,000. And if you're occupying 50% of the property, then you're going to be responsible for $50,000, which is $100,000 above the 1 million benchmark. And your pro rata share is 50% because you occupy 50% of the building. So you're responsible for additional $50,000. So now if you take your base rent and that $50,000, which is your CAM expenses, you put that together, that becomes a gross lease. So that's how a modify really works. And the pros and cons to it is that the tenant participates in share expenses, but not the full expense like triple net. And also the landlord participate larger portions of it, but they will have some techniques in there where your base rate is going to be a little bit higher than the triple net. So they try to even it out. But it's from a landlord side, is much more prevalent in the office, but it takes a lot more work because now you have to have an accounting person who has to maintain in the base year, the base stop, because every tenant's going to be different, right? So if I signed the lease in 2018, my base year is 2018. But if there was a tenant in the building who signed the lease in 2014, their base year is 2014. So they have to account for every single tenant. So it's very labor intensive from an accounting perspective. That's why some landlords don't do that. And also when you're renewing your leases, ideally, they have to reset your base year. Landlords doesn't want to do that because think about it. If 2014, you spent $800,000, in 2018, you spent $1 million. If you don't reset the base year, your threshold is $800,000. So you have to pay a higher percentage cut in the benchmark because cost goes up every year, just like inflation. So you as a tenant, when you renew, you should always request that you reset your base year because the landlord's not going to come and just say, oh, I want to reset your base year because they're going to be losing more money, which is a bigger leakage. So be mindful of that. So if you have, legal companies or financial companies, accounting firms, you take office space, always watch out for those clauses and also make sure your brokers know how to negotiate those things better for you. And lastly, it's going to be full service gross. So full service gross lease without pass-through is very similar to a lot of multifamily. So when you think about multifamily, it's apartments, right? So when you go into a multifamily and you rent, when you sign a lease for $2,000, you just pay that $2,000. They don't ask for you to pay the portions of the property taxes or the insurance or the common area maintenance because they always factor that into your rate, right? And someone's going to be out there saying, Charles, that's not true. I pay for my utilities. I pay for my trash. Yes, a lot of the new apartments now are going to have those kind of fees on top of your rent, but it's mostly gross lease because you're using the utilities, they're just passing it along to minimize their impact. That's it. But mostly it's gross lease. So industrial, office, or even retail, when you see a full service gross lease without pass-through, that's a good thing. So as a tenant, you're only responsible for your rent. So rent is $2,000, that's all you pay. That's really good for budgeting because CAMs and other things, you have like, okay, if I make $2,000 per month, how much other ancillary fees am I have to pay? But if you have a gross lease, hey, you pay your $2,000, you're good. And the burden is on the landlord to pay for the property taxes and insurance and all the common area maintenance costs associated with upkeeping the property. But mostly on a gross lease, you will see the face value rent slightly higher than a triple net, right? So then, Charles, how do I know what's a better lease? Ding, ding, ding. Great question. So how do you make all these leases apple to apple? As an example, if you have a triple net lease that's $2 per square foot, but your triple nets are $1, so then your gross rate is $3 per square foot. Now, modified could be $1.75, but they're Because at a base year, maybe your CAM and pass-throughs are only 20 cents, right? So if it's one's $1.75 with 20 cents, it's $1.95. That becomes a gross lease. So now that gross modified lease is cheaper overall than the triple net. Now, full service gross might be $2. And you're like, oh, the face value is $2. Well, it's a full service gross without pass-through, so all you do is pay $2. So that's how you make things equal and to kind of see what's a better lease structure for you. There's some other nuances with it. A lot of the landlord who do full service grows without pass-through could be mom and pop operators, so they may not be maintaining the property at the highest caliber or institutional quality, because if you're paying gross rent, anything that they save by cutting the expenses, they get to pocket. So there's more return for them. So typically you'll see a lot of Class C, Class B office products doing that because number one, that's less accounting work. That means less people, less payroll. Second, if they cut costs by janitorial or if they negotiate a better deal with their vendors, it just impacts the bottom line for the landlord. So that's why it's beneficial for the landlord. And typically you won't see too much full service gross leases on a Class A institutional quality, Blackstone owned, Hines owned properties. So those are the things you're looking for. So if I was someone starting off the small office, I need 1,000 square foot to start my company, I'm looking for the cheapest option is because every penny counts. Then instead of going into a Class A office building in Newport, New Jersey, or not New York, Manhattan, I might go to the suburbs or go to a less caliber building where I'm going to have minimal output on essentially my rent because all the money should go into my product or my business. So it's pros and cons to all different leases. And it's very important that you understand those leases as you sign them. I mean, you can click on some other, videos we did about languages and clauses of the leases that to protect yourself. If you're a landlord, what kind of lease language you should be putting in. But the full scope of the commercial real estate really falls under those three categories: triple net, modify, and full service gross. If you found this content helpful, please subscribe, like, and leave us comments. Thank you very much.